It's the end of October. Halloween is tomorrow. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 10 October new releases that I saw from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your ranking of the October new releases that you saw, and if I missed something that you think I would like, let me know about it down below in the comments section. Now, this was an interesting month because a whole bunch of these movies I saw at Fantastic Fest back in September. Fantastic Fest is a genre film festival. I went to it with Cody Leach, ran into a bunch of, they're now my Fantastic Fest friends that I see them every year at the festival and got to know them pretty well over the last several years. Several other YouTubers, influencers, people in the space. So just a great time, but also was able to see a whole bunch of movies because of that. And let's get started. In last place, The Exorcist Believer. And I went into this one pretty skeptical because I didn't think that David Gordon Green was the right person to tackle subject matter as dense and religiously focused as The Exorcist, and his particular formula of the legacy sequel, bringing back the female lead decades later. I just don't think that makes any sense with The Exorcist. So I was highly skeptical, but was hoping to be won over and at least have a generic possession movie. And in the end, what I got was a movie that at best was a clunky generic possession film. And by the end of it, it had just irritated and aggravated me in every possible way. Where even the treatment of the original film feels like an insult. The movie pauses at one point in time to have our legacy returning character to say the reason she wasn't allowed in the room of the exorcism was because of the patriarchy, despite the fact that the two people that did go in the room gave their lives, died to save her daughter. Thus, she wasn't allowed in because it was dangerous. But her attitude was, that was just the patriarchy, which is like just such a crazy line to put on the movie. And that no one went, no, don't do that. You will make everybody angry if you do something like that. And then as you move into the third act, it turns into the Exorcism Avengers, where they can't give the Catholic Church even a win, despite the franchise always just being soaked in Roman Catholicism imagery and exorcisms, things like that. And so then they have a whole team of different religious perspectives to make sure that no one is overrepresented and the Catholic priest is a coward. It's just so off-putting. The final twist in the movie with how it plays out, where these movies have always kind of been about good triumphing over evil. As dark as they can be, it's about good. God wins in the end. And then this one takes like this dark turn with the way that it plays out. Very off-putting finale. So it started off very generic, stepped on my toes in the middle, and completely lost me by the end. This is not worthy of the franchise, and I can't believe they paid $400 million for the rights for The Exorcist and greenlit this script.
It stinks!
Number 9, VHS 85. Now, I've only seen 2 of the VHS movies. Both of them were at Fantastic Fest this year for this movie, and then last year for the one that came out last year. I watched both of them at midnight screenings after very long days watching multiple movies in advance. And perhaps because of the context of where I watched them, that it was late at night, been eating junk food all day, both movies made me literally feel sick in my stomach. I felt nauseous from the camera movements, the jittery VHS effects, all of this stuff that makes it uniquely VHS. All of it made me physically ill and ruined the experience of watching both of these films. So perhaps if I'd seen this one at home, it would have worked better for me. Maybe one of the other VHS films would be more my wavelength, but like I looked at it and I went, there was like one story where I started to get invested in where they were going. So this is kind of interesting. And then it cuts to one that I didn't care about at all. And when it does kind of loop back to the one that I was kind of interested in, it was mildly clever, but not fully satisfying. And there's one from Scott Derrickson in there. And I kind of liked what they were kind of doing with it. But I was also like, well, this just could have been a movie. This could have worked on its own. So maybe the VHS franchise just isn't for me, or maybe I need to watch one of them at a normal time of day when I'm not exhausted, haven't watched way too many movies, and perhaps would be better suited to watch a movie where the camera keeps doing this. Number 8, In My Mother's Skin. This is a Filipino folk horror film, folk possession film that I saw at Fantastic Fest. And for me, I could appreciate that I'm seeing how a different culture tackles this genre that's very prominent in Hollywood. It was interesting the way they brought in Catholicism as well as local folk traditions and beliefs. And so it had a different flavor to it. It had almost like a fairy tale nightmarish vibe to it while being a possession story and incorporating these bugs into it and stuff. There are things about it that I really appreciated. But the movie overall, I thought was too slow and had too little payoff. Besides the novelty of experiencing cinema from the rest of the world and seeing their spin on the genre, I didn't really enjoy the film or get much out of it. But if you're interested in checking out a different type of possession film in global cinema, it's on Amazon Prime, so you can check it out there. Next up, Pet Cemetery Bloodlines. I saw this at its world premiere at Fantastic Fest, and I don't have any long history with the Pet Cemetery franchise. I watched the original film for the first time right before the remake came out in 2019. And so my knowledge and experience with this franchise only goes back about 4 years. I know a lot of people kind of hated the remake. I thought it was fine. I thought it brought a certain professionalism and slickness that in certain ways helped the story, and it had its own little twists and turns in there that I thought worked effectively enough. It lost the unique quirkiness of the 80s one, but it had own things to offer. I didn't hate it. This one is a prequel to the remake, telling Judd's story. The anecdote that he tells in the movie, it's unpacking that. And it's slick enough in its production. There's several actors in there that I enjoy seeing, in particular David Duchovny. The third act kind of plays like an action movie with a ticking clock to rescue someone. So superficially, it's the sort of thing that was pretty easy for me to watch and enjoy, but it just kind of comes off like a generic Pet Cemetery type film. But it chooses the wrong perspective to tell the story, so it loses all the heartbreak and emotion that you get out of the original or the remake, where those stories are so much about a parent who is desperate to ease the pain and keeps turning to a desperate solution despite knowing what will likely happen. And that what are you willing to do to bring back a loved one concept, that's not really in the new one. Because it's not told from the perspective of the side of the story that causes all this to happen. You're watching outsiders' perspectives on it. So you get some kills, some gore, some action sequences, but you don't really get to dive in on the emotional, the traumatic side to it that gives weight to everything. So superficially entertaining, but lacking any sort of emotional oomph or anything to really make it stand out. Number 6, Suitable Flesh. This is one I saw at Fantastic Fest, and it premiered this weekend on Shudder. And it's a body swap horror film based off an H.P. Lovecraft short story. And the way that it plays out is that it's kind of like a 90s erotic thriller, but as a Lovecraft horror film at the same time. And so it's combining two genres in a very interesting way that was consistently interesting and entertaining, but also very awkward at times too. I mean, a huge chunk of this movie plays like a 90s Skinamax movie, except everybody's fully clothed. Like, it's very weird direction to take, to be like this hypersexual, but also like, no, not really. No, I mean, we're not trying to make a smutty movie here. We're just putting a ton of sex in it. And so kind of an odd mix of things. I appreciated it. It worked on kind of the psychological level. It has a very distinct vibe and tone for what it's going for. And you can feel all the weird, creepy Lovecraftian lore and mythology that plays into it. So if the idea of a Lovecraftian, erotic, psychological horror thriller is appealing to you, check this one out on Shudder. 5, as in Five Nights at Freddy's, the movie that is now the third largest opening weekend for a horror film ever, behind only the It movies. It is the largest opening weekend ever for a Blumhouse film, beating Halloween 2018. And a movie for those of us that are over the age of 30 kind of feels like it came out of nowhere. And for everyone under 30, you're like, well, duh, of course this movie was going to make $1 bazillion. The only reason that I wasn't surprised by how successful this film was is because I have an 11-year-old boy in middle school who, despite the fact that up until very recently we didn't even let him play the games, was obsessed with Five Nights at Freddy's and the lore and the backstory. And months ago, my sister texted me to be like, hey, can you take my son to see Five Nights at Freddy's? This is the movie he's excited to check out. She's never done that before. For any other movie, Five Nights at Freddy's is the one. She was like, wanted to play the sister card to get her son in to see it a little bit early. So I went to go see it with my son and my nephew, and my son says it's his favorite movie of all time. It's fantastic, and we rewatched it 2 days later on Peacock when his mother got back into town. My 18-year-old nephew, who's read the books, played the games, like really into the lore, he said it was good, and he thinks Five Nights at Freddy's fans are going to like it. I have never played Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm the stranger, and only being able to observe them am I able to kind of appreciate where this movie came from. As for me, it was enjoyable enough, quirky enough with the animatronics, a fun Matthew Lillard performance, and trying to bring some emotion into it with our lead character's backstory, while at the same time being all over the place when it comes to the tone of the film, where like it's animatronic animals building forts, and then a lead character who's so traumatized by the abduction of his brother that he's downing sleep pills to try and dream and discover things. And that's played so dead serious, while this other stuff is played kind of quirky, while being about animatronic dolls possessed by abducted dead children who are killing people. Like, the tone is wacky as can be. Like, let's design that story for middle schoolers. And it worked because it's making money, and my middle schooler loved it. But far from a great horror film, but a movie that certainly has things that stand out and you remember, and afterwards you want to talk about it. Number 4, When Evil Lurks. This is another one that I saw at Fantastic Fest. It released in theaters at the beginning of the month and on Shudder this past weekend. It's an Argentinian horror film, and essentially it's a possession film with a different vibe and perspective to it. And whereas In My Mother's Skin, I was like, okay, I appreciate what you're doing here, but it doesn't really work for me. This one, I was like, okay, that was cool. I really liked that. That was neat. That was my on my wavelength. And so at its core, it is a possession story, but it kind of plays a bit more like a zombie apocalypse movie in the sense that it's kind of this thing that's spreading. And there's rules to how people get possessed and what you can and can't do. And even the way that it kind of tells the story, you see areas start to be taken over by this thing and the rampage that happens when someone is possessed. And so because of that, it was just an interesting blend of different genres, and takes something that when we think possession film here in the United States coming out of Hollywood, it's usually the same kind of formula. Roman Catholic Church comes in, something like that. We do an exorcism. And this kind of does its own different lore with all of it. Different vibe, different flavor. Bleak as can be, dark as can be, brutal, brutal horror film. So if you're looking for a different spin on the possession genre, this is the one that I would recommend. So it is in Spanish, so you have subtitles on it. You can see it on Shudder. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to share your picks down below in the comments section. If there's a movie that you think I would like that came out this month that I missed, let me know about it down below. Also, a bunch of these movies I talked about in more detail elsewhere, whether in my reviews or my Fantastic Fest ranking. If you're looking to discover some smaller things, some foreign films, stuff that I don't normally cover, I cover a bunch of it in my Fantastic Fest rankings, so you can find out about a whole bunch of things that haven't come out yet, so that might not have distribution yet. Highly recommend those if you want to discover some new hidden treasures or things that are on the horizon. In third place is Leo. This is an Indian film in the Tamil language. It is not a Bollywood movie. And it's the third movie in a shared universe, the Lokish cinematic universe. And I hadn't seen the previous two films in that universe prior to watching this movie. After watching this one, I went back and I checked them out and actually did a ranking for them, which is fun because it was my first ranking I've ever done of an Indian franchise. But this movie is actually inspired by a tribute to A History of Violence, the Viggo Mortensen, David Cronenberg movie from about 20 years ago that's actually based off of a graphic novel from a DC imprint. So Leo, in a sense, is actually a DC movie. And no one's talking about the fact that we kind of had a DC movie come out this past month. But my wife and I had so much fun with this movie. We went to the first showing, packed theater, gigantic screen. And if you haven't been opening night to an Indian film with a packed theater, it is a different experience. My wife literally said, this is the most fun I've had at a movie since Endgame. Just wild, crazy, people clapping, cheering the entire time. It's like a sporting event. And it's not people talking over the movie, it's people reacting to the movie with so much joy and glee that it makes it's just a infectious energy to it. Badass, Mr. Darcy's a badass. As for the movie itself, very much my kind of thing. It's the kind of this action thriller about this guy with a mysterious past where trouble starts coming his way, and you're slowly discovering what's kind of going on with him. And it has more graphic violence, brutal violence, visceral violence than a lot of other Indian films that I've seen. It has a couple of kind of the more over-the-top sequences. In particular, car chase gets pretty cartoonish, but otherwise a lot of them are more kind of more grounded. Not that they're realistic, but grounded fight scenes that are just fun and exciting. It's a more personal story, so you can connect with it a little bit more. I just like these types of movies, and it was so much fun to see this one in the theater. Our runner-up, Totally Killer. I was also at the world premiere of this movie at Fantastic Fest, and it was a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. It's part of this new subgenre of the last few years where they take either a movie trope or a specific movie plot and they do it as a slasher. So Freaky Friday as a slasher, freaky. You take Time Loop movie as a slasher, Happy Death Day. And in the case of this one, Back to the Future as a slasher, or Back to the Future plus Scream, and you get Totally Killer. And this movie is just right up my alley of one of the, I've said this and gotten a ton of hate for it. I've said that Back to the Future is a movie that should be remade. Not that you do a beat for beat, script for script remake, but the idea is transferable. Modern day high schooler going back and meeting their parents in high school 30 years in the past is a concept that's interesting and entertaining in a new way every generation. And I think this movie proved that, where you have this culturally sensitive, politically correct, modern day high schooler going back to the 80s and is constantly being appalled by all of these like subtle, insensitive things that are kind of going on. And the way the movie plays, it like the character is condescending, but the character comes off like, why are you being so like, we're being an idiot. And it pokes fun at the 80s for how like insensitive and ridiculous they were, while at the same time pointing out the fact that this teenager's also really ridiculous and how she's behaving and how silly a bunch of these moments are of things that she's trying to correct. And what I like, the Scream formula of the slasher whodunit. So I just thought it was a ton of fun, combining multiple things that I really enjoyed. The final resolution didn't satisfy. Was kind of like, okay, that was a combination of way too predictable and I'm unable to predict that. But besides that, the journey all along, I had a ton of fun with. But coming in at number 1, the new Scorsese film, Killers of the Flower Moon. And this movie was kind of the culmination of a 2 or 3 month journey of me making my way through all of Martin Scorsese's films. I had never done that before. And so with a new movie coming out, I thought this was the time to do that. So I did this deep dive into all of his movies where I watched them, watched all of the interviews I could find where he talked about each of the movies. I read 2 different books, one of them Scorsese on Scorsese, the other one Ebert on Scorsese, just giving different perspectives throughout the decades on how people have taken and interpreted these films. And this movie was the culmination of it, as I had never seen a Martin Scorsese film in the theater before. And at the end of this journey, I saw my first Scorsese film in the theater, Killers of the Flower Moon. And I just thought it was such a powerful film because it's looking at such a specific and fascinating point in history where the power dynamics were just kind of wacky as can be, where oil was discovered on the land of these indigenous people. So they have money. But this is in the middle of the United States, America. So all of these outsiders come in, and the outsiders control the police, control the hospitals, control the banks. All of the social structures and systems are controlled by these American outsiders, who, therefore they have power, and they want the money of these other people. And so you just see this horrific story play out as there's nowhere that these people can turn to be saved, to be have protection, for there to be justice. And there's this deep sense of hopelessness that sinks into your stomach as the movie goes along, and you're just waiting and waiting for someone to do the right thing. The nature of these people that can pretend to love someone or think they love them and just be so delusional about things that they can be so cruel. And connect with people on such human levels of claiming friendship, even marriage and family, while at the same time dehumanizing an entire group of people for the sake of greed. It's just disgusting stuff. It is too long. It should have been shorter. First half in particular needed to be tightened up. There were some aspects of it where they picked a very strange perspective, where we're from the perspective of mostly Ernest rather than the Osage people. And so they always feel kind of at distance in the middle of their own story. Very odd choice. Still an incredibly powerful film, so it comes in at number 1. Remember, you can hear my more in-detail thoughts on a bunch of these movies in either my reviews of the films or in my Fantastic Fest ranking, which was done right after I saw the film, so a little bit fresher perspective on each of them. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.